Africa. Like you said before, it does actually account for only a small amount of tourism globally, but at Hayes and Jarvis we're seeing big increases in travel to Southern Africa, East Africa, and not just safari holidays. It's an ideal place for combining safari with beach, wine, culture, food, culinary experiences. So we're seeing people booking 2 to 3 week itineraries and travelling around.
2 to 3 week itineraries.
2 to 3 week itineraries.
And what sort of prices are it's a huge portfolio, I know.
Huge
Give me the lead-ins.
Yeah, I mean, for a lead, we've got packages for South Africa, for example, from Dublin, travelling May, June this year, and you're looking at about, for a 2-week holiday, prices from €2,100 per person, but that's including all your flights, all your accommodation. Yeah.
Tony, a lot of perceptions about Africa that have to be laid to rest.
Yeah, I seem to be doing it quite regularly and have been doing it since the 90s. Africa is a continent, I think we all fail to understand the scale of what it embraces. If we just take, for example, South Africa as a country, there are 11 languages, official. Now, just indulge yourselves with that for a moment. English is widely spoken, Afrikaans is widely spoken, and then, depending on where you are, it's Zulu, Xhosa, or whatever. In Ethiopia, for example, we have 83 different languages with over 200 dialects. That gives you a scale of a country with 100 million people, with high veld and low veld. So we don't understand that. We can't understand that. So in order to find out about the various countries within the African continent, you must talk to professionals. Like Dawn from Botswana is over here at the moment, and she's literally giving you data on one of the most incredible countries for game viewing. If you look at in South Africa, you've got a game reserve called Madikwe. Madikwe traverses Botswana and South Africa. There are no borders. The animals are free to travel. It is malaria free. Now, I'm not trying to diss Kruger, but in Kruger, technically, northern Kruger, you must have malaria covered. In the south, you'll get away with it. Now, my view on that is I don't think a mosquito knows when to turn back. So you need to protect yourself fully. So if you want the ease of access, these things are available to you. The other thing with regard to...
Is access improving, Tony?
Pardon me?
Is access to the
very much so.
From Ireland?
To give you an example, we fly 4 times a week to Addis Ababa, and daily from Addis Ababa to over 58 destinations within Africa, plus another 19 within Ethiopia. Our aircraft are all practically brand new. The only thing that's stopping us from having brand new aircraft on every single route is the fact that Boeing and Airbus cannot build aircraft quick enough for us.
Right. Tolene, South Africa, when Irish people go there, what patterns are you noticing? Where do they tend to go? Where do they tend to stay? And what do they tend to do?
We're seeing quite a large increase in the Irish visit to South Africa, and we're actually seeing a longer stay. Just our data from Q3, we're seeing about 22 nights, which is phenomenal. It's people really have a lot of time to travel. We are finding that the Irish travellers enjoying Cape Town Winelands garden route quite a lot, obviously amazing wine, but we're working with the Irish market to push a little bit more into the other geographical regions.
But the wine route and the garden route, it's really caught the imagination, isn't it? It's a big honeymooner.
Yeah.
So what proportion are doing the Cape Town?
Probably the majority. We don't have the data on exactly the percentage, but the majority are doing Cape Town at the moment, because that's the key
Give me
place.
a little picture of what that involves. Let's say I book my honeymoon and I do the wine route or the garden route out of Cape Town. What does that holiday involve?
Well, generally it's about 4 or 5 nights in Cape Town itself, and you get to go and see Table Mountain, you go and get to see Cape Point and the African Penguin Colony in Simonstown, the waterfront, the Robben Island where Nelson Mandela was incarcerated, and then going out to the winelands. It's normally a recommendation, I'd say, of about 3 to 4 nights. We've got some of the longest wine routes in the world. There are hundreds and hundreds of wine farms that are open to the public, and then heading across either through Route 62, which is the inland route, to Oudtshoorn, where you've got the Kango Caves, the ostriches, etc., or along the coastal route down to the garden route. And then you've got Knysna, Plettenberg Bay, probably about 4 nights there, and then ending off with a game lodge, either down in the Eastern Cape or flying up to Kruger or Madikwe. And some people actually tag on Zimbabwe onto the end of that, which we're happy to share Zimbabwe with.
Siobhan, it's really all about the animals. Where's the best safari from your point of view?
Well, what happens a lot of the time is if people are coming from Ireland, the first time they do a safari, they tend to go to South Africa because it's very good value, the food and everything, and you have the animal experience. But then if they want the classic type of safari, a lot of them will go to Kenya or Tanzania. And they go to look for the big five, and the animal aspect is more important for them. But the one thing that Kenya would have as well would be sort of the people experience, that you meet, like there's 49 different tribes. You would, have a lot of sort of cultural engagement. After Kenya, the other country that people often want to go to will be somewhere like Zambia, because leopard would be more elusive in Kenya and Tanzania, but you see a lot of leopard in Zambia, and you can do things like walking safari, so you sort of get up close with nature as well. But a big trend at the moment, a big growing interest from a point of view of our clients, would be what are called twitchers, people who are bird mad. And a lot of people now are going for, like, we had clients recently who went to the Ruaha Valley in Tanzania, and in southern Tanzania, and like they saw over 326 birds. So it changes. And then each country, like you'd find wild dog in some countries, not in others. You've got the oryx in Namibia, some in the very, very north of Kenya.
There's a big variation in price, and I'm not just talking about your own product, but Botswana would have a reputation as having probably the best safari, but also the most expensive. So when you mix that thing of budget and wildlife, what do you think is the best mix of the
I know
two?
the starting point was 2,000 here. Like the cheapest that we would ever do would be around 3,000 per person, but the average good safari would be 10 to 12,000 for two people.
The average good would be 10
Yeah.
to 12.
And Botswana, we've got places like Belmont have fantastic properties, and there's tips and sort of tricks in the trade, because Belmont are properties, but they will do sort of the guiding and the transfers, and it makes it much cheaper than if you were to get someone else to do it. So, but on the other hand, you pay for quality, and you have experiences of a lifetime.
People are a little bit scared. What's the best value, or what's the budget entry level safari price that you can put onto the marketplace?
I would say the best destination, if you've got a budget conscious customer for safari, would be Kenya.
Kenya for start.
Yeah. You've got less to travel, obviously, flight wise, destination wise, so anywhere in East Africa, but I would say Kenya is probably your best bet for entry level. Still big five, fantastic experience, but yeah, you're going to see that price.
And where would you go? Masai Mara?
That's one of my favorites. Masai Mara, Lake Nakuru, the Great Rift Valley, Amboseli, Samburu in the north, but you can easily do a 7 to 9 day. Yeah.
Great. Tony, same thing, where you're looking at the overview of the entire continent. Give us a little map of where the wildlife is and where the price.
I think for us, for our perspective,
Price points.
the fact that we fly to every major airport in Africa is indicative of the scale that we can deliver for you. I've put some fare sheets on every second chair there, and you'll notice the first thing, there's a fare to Addis Ababa of €660, and it's actually €200 cheaper to fly to Cape Town.
Tony,
And that makes,
tell me how it's cheaper to go to Addis Ababa and then fly to Cape Town.
Well, you know
than
my
it is to
form.
fly just
You
to
know my
Addis
form,
Ababa.
I'm fairly direct, so I'll be direct again. We don't have any competition to Addis Ababa, so we can charge what we like. But to Cape Town, we've tons of it, and we've been very, very realistic about what we're
I'll
trying to
mention
achieve.
the rivals here, Turkish Air.
There's more than that.
Through London and Paris.
Quite
as well.
frankly, imagine, no matter how much we believe how good we are, and we are a very good carrier, we're acknowledged as such, there are other good carriers out there, and we have to take recognizance of cost in everything we do. So our business class fare and our economy fare is highly competitive. Reason being, whether we like it or not, everybody who wants to take a trip to Africa for the first time is going to be driven towards Cape Town, because it's a soft entry. No disrespect to Cape Town, but it's about as African as Dublin is. I'm going to be shocked by that by a lot of people, but
I think
there we go.
Tolene has given you a look already. Yeah.
To actually get to the game viewing exercise, you again, a lot of people don't want to be made afraid. So conservation game viewing is obviously of interest. There's a lot of that in the Eastern Cape. I know Nick has some of it in his brochure. I spotted it. I flicked through it yesterday. And it's a very good soft entry into game viewing. I like what Nick said about Kenya. I think that's very, very relevant. For me, my favourite, and Tolene needs to put her fingers in her ears here, it's Botswana. I think if you go into Chobe, and the vision of the animals is incredible, because you have it from land, you also have it from water. There are literally boating safaris where you can go out all day, have lunch, have dinner, and the animals are just all over the place. Again, it's a more expensive option. There are some game reserves in Africa that I just would not allow anybody to visit if I had my way. They should be just shut down.
Okay.
But that's another conversation.
Private reserves versus the big, you've got the iconic Kruger National Park and Shoshlui and all of those. The private reserves seem to be the destination of choice for many holidaymakers. Would you see a reason for that, or would you prefer them to be going into the large natural game parks that you guys have in such an abundance?
I think if you take Kruger National Park into consideration, the majority of the fences are dropped, so you're going to see the animals running freely anyway. So the difference is, for me, the private reserve is for those who haven't done East Africa before or haven't done that real wild experience, want to get up close and personal with a private ranger and a tracker who, the tracker generally was born and bred and grew up in the area. So they know the area, they know the animals. So you're getting that real experience. But if you want to get into the park, the Kruger National Park or Addo Elephant National Park or Shoshlui, you're going in with your own vehicle and just driving around at your own leisure, 3-4 hours, however long you really want to, is also incredible, because you get the different types of, you get your pamphlets and what's what and all that sort of stuff. You can do it far cheaper than taking a private game reserve.
To explain, the private is effectively a farmland that was cleared and turned back into the game reserve, to the wildlife reserve it would have been 100 years ago. And
some of them, yes.
It's effectively a safari park. It's Photo Island, except it's in the real African environment. Would that be fair to say?
So in the Kruger National Park, it used to be private homesteads, that they literally just turned into game lodges, and you can only have a certain number of rooms. So they're trying to keep the conservation intact there, and then lowered all the fences so the game's free roaming.
And before I go to the audience, I'll ask Siobhan very quickly, are we obsessed with the big five? Has it become sort of the checklist? You have to see these 5 animals, and we are missing some beautiful places because they don't have the big 5. Is that becoming a pattern?
Well, we don't find that, because we have people who might have an interest. Like when you're talking about the gardens in South Africa, that you'll have a group of people traveling just to see gardens, and they, if they see some animals as part of the itinerary, it's a bonus. Like the walking safaris, you don't see the big 5 when you're doing a walking safari. If you're doing a horse riding safari, it's quite funny because...
Horse riding is amazing.
Yeah, the animals think you're a part of the horse. So you can get up close and personal with the lines, like you can almost feel their breath, and you're going past them. But the only problem is they can chase the horse with you on it. So it's a very good dinner story, years to come. But unfortunately, they think you're part of the horse, but they will allow you that access. Right. Another thing, though, that's happening a lot is people combine countries. And just when you look at this and you see it's 411 euros into Kenya and, out from Cape Town, it's a lot of people, if they're doing Africa, they think, I'm going to do it properly. And they want to do more than one country. So they might do Kenya or they might do Botswana, but then they add in somewhere like Rwanda to see the gorillas or the golden monkey. So we're finding a lot more people are doing more than one country.
More than one country.
Yeah.
A question from the third last row there. Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah, sorry. I'd like anybody give me a definitive answer about yellow fever certificates.
Yellow fever.
Because Tanzania is the country I was interested in, and I keep getting mixed messages about what's needed and where you can go through to get there safely.
Okay, I can come in on yellow fever. If somebody wants to take it here. Yeah, Tony.
I think first of all, what you have people here on the stage, I'm an airline, Nick's a tour operator, Tolene is tourist board, and Siobhan is a tour operator. I think it would be wrong of us to even talk about inoculations. You really must contact the Tropical Medical Bureau for the up-to-date relevant information. We're travel people, we're not medical people.
I'm happy to come in there. Do you want to come in, Siobhan?
It's like Tanzania, you need the yellow fever. But I have gone from Kenya into South Africa and from South Africa into Kenya. Both countries don't require yellow fever, but because you're coming from the other country, they've looked for the certificate. Yeah. So in theory, they didn't need it, but in practice, I was checked for it.
The short answer is it's really important to have the documentation, because crossing a land border, even if the regulations, even if all the information, the internet tells you one thing, you're dealing with a youth with a gun who is stopping you getting across the border. And the one thing that they all understand is that health passport. Now, yellow fever, the regulations have changed on it. If you have an old yellow fever inoculation, it used to be stipulated it only lasted for 10 years. They've now decided it lasts forever. So even if you have one from 10, 15 years ago and bring it with you, it generally will be enough to win the argument. But the very strong message is, and the Tropical Medicine Bureau people were here yesterday, is the err on the side of caution. Have some sort of documentation to show that you have yellow fever, and it's now valid for life, so it's not that big a deal that you have to keep going back and renewing it. And don't follow the advice that you'll find on the internet or in brochures or in books, because sometimes you're dealing with a border guard who doesn't believe that. Would that be fair to say? Would people agree with that? Yeah. And we have. Do you want to come in? Yes.
Yeah, sorry, but the problem is some people, like myself, cannot be given a yellow fever inoculation.
Now we have a problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
So now we need to know where we can go and where we can't go.
Okay, are there stipulations going to South Africa, Tolene, on yellow fever?
So South Africa, you don't need the yellow fever unless you are traveling from a country, a yellow fever area into the country. So if you're traveling from here directly in South Africa, there's no need for the yellow fever inoculation. So you're welcome to come visit us, rather.
That's as far as we can answer your question. You're free to get into South Africa. I'm not exactly sure about Kenya, Tanzania.
Kenya you can go into. Zambia, they look first. Botswana, they
Sorry, your mic's gone.
So Kenya, you don't need it. Botswana, as far as the last time we checked, they're not looking for it. Zambia, they are.
Zambia, they are.
Yeah.
Botswana, they're not. Ethiopia, Tony?
It's recommended.
Recommended for Ethiopia.
Same for Tanzania
But
as
if
well.
you're
And recommended Tanzania. Okay.
If you're going through Ethiopia to one of these countries,
Well, like if you're going in transit, that's not an issue. Because in transit, you're just landing in Addis Ababa, connecting with your flight. It depends on where you're going to. If you're going to South Africa, that's not a problem. Like I do this all the time. Dublin, Addis, Joburg, or Cape Town, or whatever. No issues whatsoever. None.
Are you
Welcome.
satisfied? Great. And we have another question here. Come.
Hello, I have a two-pronged question there. Sometimes in certain borders in certain parts of Africa, whether it be North Africa, South Africa, or in between Central Africa, you will come across certain corrupt officials. And unfortunately, you will get these sort of people all over the world. And sometimes they will ask for a dash with a little bit of money. And if you put it up to them and you ask for the management, they soon back down. So what is your call on that?
Call and corruption. Do you want to come in, Tony? You've been long.
Well, for some reason they try to corrupt me all the time, particularly when you're driving and you're stopped at a checkpoint. Very much, I just once I produce my Irish driving license, the colour goes out of his face, because there's not a whole lot he can do with you. He also tried, for example, to say to me that there's a fine on your card, it hasn't been paid. I said, well, I've just hired the card today in Johannesburg and I'm en route to Mkuze. Well, we can't let you go. There's a charge in your car. Well, I said, here's my paperwork.
Is the call to stand up against
it's very much put your backbone out there and look him square in the eye and tell him this isn't going anywhere.
Right. And Tolene, this is something you guys are asked a fair bit. What's the official line on it from the tourist board point of view? Is it that you never cooperate with someone?
Yeah. They have no, so in that case, if they stop you, because they can spot a hired car a mile away, if they stop you and they say to you, we're going over the speed limit or whatever, you need to pay them on the spot, there is no on-the-spot payment. So all you do is say to them, it's a hired car, the speeding fine goes to the hired car, and the hired car will then charge me, which is what the agreement was. If they say they're going to take you to the police station or whatever, just say, that's fine, we'll drive to the nearest police station. Just insist on speaking to management, as the gentleman said, and insist on saying that the hired car is going to be sending me the charge. And any other cross-border corruption, etc. Again, we as countries are fully aware of it, and the Border Association, the Department of Home Affairs in every country, they're working to combat corruption, but unfortunately money talks. Never give the money. There's nothing they can do to you because you have a valid passport, you have valid travel documents, there's nothing they can do to you.
So never pay the stipend. Okay.
The other question I have there is about big game hunting. You see dentists and other orthodontists and other different people around the world coming out to shoot innocent animals for the sake of it, you know what I mean? Where you have local people trying to protect the game and other different things, right? Sometimes, right, as poachers will kill animals indiscriminately out in these countries, and they mightn't even be from these countries. They come across borders in different countries, and people are trying to protect their livelihood and everything, right, to show tourists and other local people and to help young people understand the environment around them, right? What is your call on this? What do you read this as, right? Because it's not good for tourism and for everything in general and as a purpose.
Are we winning the war, Tolene?
We're fighting the war. We're fighting the war incredibly hard. The poachers or the trophy hunters, etc., will always be there. But conservation in South Africa itself, and as in Botswana or Namibia or anywhere in Africa, is top priority for us, because we have to protect our animals for our future. And without our animals, the planet won't survive. So it's a constant battle, I'm afraid. And when you're saying, you know, the locals, communities, etc., they are the poorer communities. They've grown up hunting for animals, and they'll hunt the animals in public spaces. They won't necessarily go into the private reserves. There are unfortunately poachers, and again, as I say, money talks. It's a constant fight. Conservation is there. The World Wildlife Trust works with us. We're fully aware of it, and we're working hard to condemn it.
It seems to vary from country to country. Some countries have been very, very successful in combating it, and Botswana is probably an example of people who've put a lot of resources into the fight. Does anyone want to come in with a Pan-African view?
Yeah, I think for me, it's about education as well. I mean, with all due respect, I think if we can stop the notion that tusks of rhino and tusks of ellies are going to help save you from cancer in China and Southeast Asia and all that. If we can get that message across, this will stop in time.
So
there are very good people out there working really hard to help this, but education has to come into this so we can actually get the message in from the root.
Come in, Siobhan.
My husband is Kenyan, and he used to be head of the anti-poaching unit in Kenya, and you would see the poachers in Kenya paid maybe $10. Whereas the international big names abroad were the ones who were making the money, and not the poor people who were trying to find a way to support their children. So, like in Kenya, we've had a greater problem since the Chinese came in, but again, it's being managed. They realise there's an issue.
Third row.
Hi, I work for Botswana Tourism, so I'm representing the government.
Dawn works for Botswana, and she's a veteran. She's been on our podium.
I just wanted to answer both of those questions. As far as poaching goes, Botswana last year lost about 17 animals to poachers. We have the largest population of elephant, and it's growing in Botswana by about 7% a year. So we actually work very, very hard. We have a big anti-poaching unit who are going around. They spend their time with the rhino 24/7 to stop them being poached. So from that point of view, we're doing really, really well in Botswana. And as far as the corruption goes, Botswana is in the top 10 on the world of least corrupt countries. We do have speeding fines, and you do get stopped by the police, but they have to show you what your speeding was against what it should have been, and they do take on-the-spot fines, but they have to provide you with the documentation to show that that's what you did.
Thank you very much for the intervention, Donna. I'll take one more question. We're going to run out of time very, very quickly, and we have a roving microphone or two. Anybody else want to come in? Okay, I want to just to finish up. You've had very little take here, but give me a little bit of what you see happening in Africa over the next year, and what are the trends that you're seeing in booking, and where people are tending to gravitate towards.
I think to agree with what you said as well, we're going to see a lot more multi-centre itineraries.
Multi-centre?
A lot of people travelling for longer. Luxury rail is really up and coming for us as well, so there's fantastic rail journeys throughout all of Southern Africa. And Madagascar is probably my top tip for 2018.
Tony, Cape Town is probably your biggest...
Cape Town is probably our biggest
so
market that we do the least amount of work for. But for us, we've just developed a business called Ethiopian Holidays. It's our own tour operation in Ethiopia. It services the whole of Africa. But what we're doing is slightly differently in that we're not actually doing it ourselves. We're embracing all the tour operators in Ethiopia to come on board, and we find the correct tour operator for the correct inquiry. Ethiopia as a destination is very much a historically, cultural, diverse country. The oldest church in the world is in Addis Ababa. The fossil of the oldest living being, until one was found in Joburg, was in Addis Ababa and is in the museum. Lalibela as a historical religious
it's a
resort is
collection
incredible.
of stone churches. It looks like
It's incredible. You've also got the Simeon Mountains if you want to adventure. Without denigrating the Simeon Mountains, it's called the poor man's Kilimanjaro.
Great.
It's not as expensive to do. It's also, you've got such a diverse opportunity, and then come back to Debrecen, which is about an hour and a half from Addis Ababa, and you've got a 5-star resort property with, food and everything else.
What are the connections, the big connections through Addis Ababa that you're seeing growth in? Cape Town is by far the biggest.
Cape Town, we're getting a lot more.
Africa, what are
we're getting a lot more traffic into Joburg than we used to, because it goes on from there. What's huge for us is Nairobi. Huge. Obviously, Tanzania. Obviously, well, actually,
Zanzibar.
Quite frankly, what is the growth destination now for us is going to be Harare.
Okay. Tolene, Irish are great dispersers. The garden route, the wine route, they knew about it. Where would you be sending them? Where do you see the growth in South Africa for places they should be going?
We're seeing some really good growth in the Mpumalanga Limpopo area, so obviously where the Kruger National Park is, but also around the Cradle of Humankind, which is outside Johannesburg, that's in Gauteng. So the whole northern sector of South Africa, there's so much variety, so much experience, and we all come from the cradle. That's where we come from. So you need to go home. You need to go find yourself.
Go back to where your ancestors.
But we a huge pickup from the Irish market, multi-generational travel, sort of adventure, lifestyle, etc. And this year, 2018, is the year of Nelson Mandela. It's the year that he would have turned 100. So there's a lot of that a lot of historical values that's going to happen. We're going to be doing a lot around that as well.
Kenya, Tanzania, Siobhan, the roads are getting better. It's no longer taking as long to get around the country. Is that it?
Yes, but to be honest, a lot of people would tend to do internal flights within Kenya and Tanzania because it could be around $100 and it saves you a day. Like, I remember one time, it was the first time I went to Kenya, and on the list of things to bring with me is a sports bra because the roads are so bad, you're going like this all the time. So, but the thing is that the internal flights are very, very cheap. But when people go to Kenya, like my husband's Kenyan, he's part of the Samburu tribe, he's a bushman in the north of Kenya. But a lot of our clients, they don't just go to see, they go to feel, they go to do, and they go to engage. So for example, like people are asking us, can they meet people when they're there? So we have this journalist who worked for one of the Dutch daily newspapers, and he was the African correspondent, and he interviewed all the dictators. So people love meeting him for dinner, or meeting someone from the Defna Sheldrick, orphanage, like for the elephants, or meeting some of the white Kenyans who've been there for generations to get their take on things. Or lastly, another thing is to spend the night with my husband's tribe. And like when people do things like that, they say they arrived a tourist, but they left a traveller. So it's a completely different experience.
Arriving a tourist, leaving a traveller, engage, go into them, meet the people. Terrific message from Africa. You've been a great audience. Thank you so much. And thank you to my quartet. Tolene delayed a flight actually to participate in this. We're really, really grateful that you went to all that trouble. And thank you very, very much.